The year is 1999. That sentence brings me back to my senior kindergarten class when I was 5 years old, where we used to read out the date on the blackboard every single day. The year 1999 exists as a stain in my mind, however, as a memory that will not go away no matter how I try to forget it. 1999 marked the year I lost my first tooth, my first time on a plane, and unfortunately, the early loss of my childhood innocence. That one memory that refuses to be wiped. It all started with that new, or old, TV. At that time, Pokemon was the latest fad to hit the school. Pokemon cards, games, stickers, and the most popular, the TV show. So of course, every time I came home from school, I would stay glued to the TV until Pokemon came on at 5. The only problem was that my dad watched the news at 5:30, and Pokemon episodes were back to back, which meant I had to miss an episode every day. Something I whined on and on about. My dad got tired of hearing me complain every day. That must be why he went and bought another TV. My dad put the TV he bought me in my room. Unfortunately, it was just an old, small boob tube with rabbit ears even. It also only had 20 channels available, not including the channel Pokemon was on. I recall I didn't care though. I was just thrilled I had my own TV in my room. After surfing through the channels, I came to a conclusion that only Channel 2, TVO Kids, was worth watching, so I watched that for a while. It wasn't for another few months until I discovered Channel 21. One day in April, I was flipping through the channels, trying to see if Pokemon was on. I pressed Channel 21 into the remote, hoping there was more channels, and to my delight, there was. My dad was surprised too. But he let me watch it because it seemed to have kids programs on it. The channel was called Camden Local 21, and later I found out it was indeed broadcasted from the town of Camden, Ontario, a town very close to my city. The shows I saw on Camden Local 21 looked poorly made, and I never understood what was going on in them half the time. However, as I grew up, every time I thought of that channel, I realized more and more how messed up the shows were, and I had to ask myself, what the fuck was I watching? The following is a list of shows and episodes I remember seeing on Camden Local 21. How I remember such detail even disturbs me, but I guess things like this stand out in your mind for a while. There were only 3 shows I could find on the channel. Probably because the channel was only operated between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. April 1999. Booby, Episode 6, Together. I recall Booby was a show where the characters were simply live-action hands. No puppets or anything, just hands. The show featured a hand named Booby who found himself in a new situation every episode. The show was only 5 minutes long and looked like it was shot in front of a damp, decaying wall, with the hands always on the table, with a red tablecloth. Very low budget, obviously. This was the first episode I watched. The episode began with Booby trying to get ketchup out of a bottle. It actually showed him beating himself against the bottom of the bottle for a good 3 minutes. Finally, another hand came by and looked at Booby. Together, the other hand said, and it began beating the bottle as well, until some ketchup finally squirted all over the table. I chuckled slightly at this part. Booby then stared at the ketchup mess for a few seconds before turning towards the camera as it slowly zoomed in on him. Mr. Bear's Cellar, Episode 12. Very sketchy name if you were to look at it nowadays. The show featured a guy wearing a bear mascot costume who would get new visitors into his cellar every day. It was always a kid. The show was filmed with a camcorder, and not a very good one either. The police asked me a lot of questions about this show. This episode started with Mr. Bear sitting at the table, playing checkers by himself. I didn't recognize it at first, but the table was the same table from Booby. He sat there, playing for a bit until there was a knock at the door. The camera was then looking up the stairs at the door, where there was another knock. Mr. Bear climbed the stairs and opened the door to reveal two young children. One was a boy about my age, and the other was a girl who looked about 8. Mr. Bear danced in delight and then started talking to the kids. I couldn't hear any of them that well. I remember Mr. Bear then led the kids into the cellar, which was quite dark, only lit by a small oil lamp on the table. I can't really remember that much more, except him singing a song, which I couldn't hear too well either, probably because of the large bear mask. The episode ended with them playing hide and seek, with the kids hiding in the closet, and Mr. Bear counting. May 1999. Soup and Spoon. I don't think this was even a show. I think it was more of a special movie thing. All I know is I stopped watching Camden Local 21 for a while because I thought this show was too stupid, especially since Pokemon Now came on at 4:30 and 5. I don't remember much of this, but it showed a can of soup and a spoon, both attached to strings, swinging back and forth as if someone was holding them and dangling them in front of the camera. Interestingly enough, the show was shot in a basement, which looked just like the one used in Mr. Bear's cellar. Like I said, I can't remember much. The only thing I can remember clearly was the end. The entire thing was only half an hour, and just included stuff I found stupid, such as the spoon chasing the soup around trying to eat him. The ending showed a table, the one from Booby once again, and about 7 kids sitting around it, each with a bowl of soup in front of them. They were sitting and looking at the camera, but with confused, almost frightened faces. The cameraman then held the can of soup in front of the kids and said, "Spoons ready?" And then it just stopped. July 1999. It was summer, and I hadn't watched Channel 21 for a while, until one day I slept over at my friend's house. I decided to check it out again. My friend had gotten a TV in his room for his 6th birthday, so we stayed up very late. For us, 9:30 was very late, and watched TV. That's when I remembered Channel 21 and brought it up to my friend. We decided to see if it was on, and to our surprise it was. They must have changed the broadcasting time. Mr. Bear's Cellar, episode 23. This episode was entertaining for my friend and I, mainly because it had swearing. However, when I think of this episode, I realize something was definitely wrong when it was filmed. The episode started with the camera on its side, while it was facing Mr. Bear, who was walking up the stairs to the cellar door. The camera then blacked out for about a second before fading back in, back upright and facing Mr. Bear. There was also another kid talking to him, but this kid looked about 11 or 12. He was talking to Mr. Bear for a while, but I couldn't hear well, again with the crappy camcorder, until the kid started raising his voice. The kid was saying how it was late, and his sister had to go home. You could also hear more voices in the background. I remember Mr. Bear clearly saying,
"Get the fuck out. You're not invited,"
with a deep voice muffled by the bear mask. I remember my friend and I looking at each other and laughing at the mention of the forbidden F word. But the episode got weirder. The kid began climbing the stairs before turning around and saying how he was going to call the police. Mr. Bear began breaking into a run towards the kid, who started screaming and running as well. The camera then cut out, and that was the end of the episode. The channel then turned to static shortly after. Booby, episode 42. Playing with scissors. One rainy afternoon, I was bored, so I decided to watch Channel 21. When I started watching, some show about a guy sitting in an armchair was just finishing. I forgot what it was about though. When I first saw this episode, I thought it was for teenagers because it had blood in it, and it was very gross. When the police told me everything, I know who the blood belonged to. The episode showed Booby with another hand with a ribbon around its pinky finger, Booby's girlfriend. Booby was holding scissors and hopping around back and forth while his girlfriend slowly swung around aimlessly. Another hand shot onto the screen. This hand was smaller though, and was jerking around violently, as if someone under the table was forcing the hand, and later I found this was the case.
Scissors are very dangerous, kids. Now hold them safely.
Booby said to the camera. I noticed I could hear muffled screams, but I wasn't sure where it was coming from because of the bad sound quality. Booby's girlfriend grabbed the smaller hand, which was thrashing about, and Booby went at it with the scissors. It started with a thumb. He opened the scissors wide and clasped them onto the thumb. Blood began oozing out of the muffled screams were very loud now. My 5-year-old self was very grossed out, and that's when I decided maybe Booby was a show meant for teenagers or grown-ups. Then the scissors got to the bone. A horrible crunching noise was heard, and that's when I turned the TV off. I never discussed it with my dad because I feared he would limit my TV time. August 1999. I didn't want to watch Channel 21 after that Booby episode. In August, I grew more curious to see Mr. Bear's cellar for some reason though. The last episode I saw of Mr. Bear was weird and had swearing, which also made me think the show was meant for teenagers. Nonetheless, I flipped onto Channel 21 when my dad was busy. Mr. Bear's Cellar, episode 28. Apparently this episode had been playing for the entire month of August. It was studied a lot by the police. The entire episode was just Mr. Bear sitting in a chair talking to the audience.
Hello, kids. Do you want to visit my cellar? If you do, please write me a letter at this address.
The screen then switched to a white screen with multicolored letters reading the address. And that is what I remember for the rest of the episode. And guess what? I actually did. I sent Mr. Bear, or the sick bastard who portrayed him, a letter. I did it out of curiosity mostly. My dad was okay with it because he thought it was a legit kid show. But then again, he never saw any of what was going on Channel 21. So I wrote a letter using my best writing possible. I think I just said how I wanted to meet Mr. Bear and if Booby also lived in the cellar. So my dad sent the letter to the address Mr. Bear said on the show. It stayed on all day, anyway, for some reason. It took about a week to get a response, which I was surprised I did. I still have the letter I received August 15th, 1999. The letter read,
Dear Elliot, thank you ever so much for your letter. I would love to have you in my cellar. We play games, watch movies, and go fire camping in the middle of the woods. And yes, Booby does live in my cellar. He is a good friend of mine. Come to my house at...
The police cut out this address.
Camden, Ontario, Canada. I look very forward to having fun with you. Love, Mr. Bear.
I cannot believe my dad never found this sketchy because he actually took me to the house. And then that's when the police became involved. Those endless questions, those pictures of the terrified kids, the woods, brings me to why I'm writing this blog. That psycho and his friends did some fucked up shit back then. And now it seems he's trying to get into contact with me again. The entire police thing is coming back. That has brought 1999 back to me. Over a decade later, it is happening again. Update. September 21st, 2011. People have been emailing me, asking me what exactly happened in 1999. I will get to that. Those weird TV shows I was watching apparently were meant to attract kids to Mr. Bear's house. What Mr. Bear did shocked the entire town. My dad actually drove me to Camden along with the address Mr. Bear left on the letter. The house was actually in the outskirts of town, in the open farmland. I still remember that house. It looked like an older farmhouse that had been built in the early 1900s. The windows were all boarded up, and the house looked in a state of disrepair. As we walked up to the house, I remember my dad checking the address over and over again and looking at the house in disbelief. Then the door opened. I expected Mr. Bear to be at the door. I was surprised to see a police officer emerge from the creaking doorway. The officer began talking to my dad while I quickly asked if that was Mr. Bear's house. The officer's face cringed slightly and muttered, "Oh God," or something like that. He started talking quietly to my dad so I couldn't hear, although my dad told me to go to the car anyway. And then we just went home. My dad was quiet the whole way home. I felt something strange had happened. My dad never told me what happened for a while. I forgot about it anyway, too. Channel 21 no longer came on, and when I asked about it, my dad would not acknowledge its existence. I think it was when I was 13 where I learned the truth. I remembered Channel 21 one day and asked my dad about it. I guess he finally decided I should hear the truth. Camden Local 21 was a local TV channel that ran from October 1997 through August 1999 in the Peel region of Ontario. The entire channel was made for a house in Camden, the one I visited, and run by a man who was not really known to anyone in the town. The channel was only available to older TVs because the signal was only picked up by rabbit ears, a weaker frequency. The man created all the shows on the channel, all of which were kids shows. His hand was Booby. He was Mr. Bear. And he was the mysterious cameraman. The real reason he created the channel was more disturbing than what was originally thought. As you might have already guessed, he kidnapped kids and held them in his cellar. But while most people thought he was a serial child molester, he really wanted to use those kids for another purpose. The day I arrived, the man had fled his house the night before, the day before the police went in for their investigation. I wasn't the only one who was watching. Update, November 9th, 2011. Sorry for not answering any questions for so long. I haven't accessed my email account for a long time. Anyway, let me finally set things straight about what I know. Back in October, I visited the house previously owned by the man who ran Camden Local 21. 2 women lived there, operating a daycare business. How ironic. Now to answer the questions you guys emailed to me. Question: who else watched Camden Local 21? Answer: I know other people watched it for sure, including those kids who wound up at Mr. Bear's house. After some Google searches, I found a few people on Neo-Seeker forums who were discussing shows from Camden Local 21. They talked about the kids shows I watched. Also 2 other shows I had never seen before. A user named I Am Real Life seemed to know all the shows that were broadcasted on Channel 21. Here are 2 I've never heard of: The Fallen Angel and Life. I Am Real Life described it as a fairly boring show about a guy rambling on and on in front of the camera about how we must please Satan and appease him before it is too late. Paint with the Soul, I Am Real Life, and another user called Siggy92 were discussing this show. They described it as Blair Witch-like, as it consisted of a cameraman wandering around a forest at night, doing nothing particularly interesting. I'll go looking for the conversation and see if I can get the link. Question: where is Mr. Bear, or the guy who wore the costume? Answer: if I didn't know, I would have said earlier. I have no idea where this guy is, if he's dead or alive. Hopefully dead. When I see my dad's friend next time, I will ask him about this. Maybe I can get more of a definite answer. Question: what did Mr. Bear do to the children? Answer: this is by far the most common question I've been asked. I found this out in October as well, via my dad's friend who is a retired Camden regional officer. Apparently, the man playing Mr. Bear took the kids out of the house and into the forest nearby. What he did there, police are not sure exactly how it happened. The 16 charred bodies of the children between the ages of 4 and 13 were found in a 15 by 15 ditch deep within the forest. My dad's friend did not want to go into exact details, but I'm seeing him next Thursday anyway, so maybe I can extort more information from him then. That's all I have for now. Thanks for keeping an interest in my blog. I'll try to gather as much information as I can for my next post. I've actually been getting pretty interested in this myself. It should be my right to know what the hell happened.